Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. This week, we're discussing that crucial moment that every professional athlete has to face when they have to step away from sport and face retirement. My guest this week is David Mead, a former professional rugby league player who enjoyed a 14-year career playing for the Brisbane Broncos and Gold Coast Titans in Australia's NRL and the Catalan Dragons in Super League. From growing up in humble surroundings in Papua New Guinea to lifting the Challenge Cup with the Dragons at Wembley, to that moment, that realisation that it was time to retire from professional sport. What are his experiences? What are the challenges he's faced along the way? And how has he handled them? Well, let's find out now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Well, David, I'm delighted to welcome you onto this week's podcast from your base in Australia, where you're joining us today. Welcome along.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to our conversation.
Now we're going to, in this episode, focus on that transition from being a professional sports athlete into life after sport. And many of our listeners that are rugby league fans will know you from a successful career playing across the NRL down under in Australia and for several years with the Catalan Dragons in the Northern Hemisphere in Super League. But for those that aren't perhaps that familiar with your story, take us a little bit along the journey that brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, I guess going back a little bit, I played 14 years of professional rugby league, NRL, and then a couple of years in the Super League, played for the Catalan Dragons over there, 3 years. But I guess going back to where it all started for me, I was born in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, down in the Southern Hemisphere here. Dad was Australian, Mum was Papua New Guinean. They got married. She got married at a pretty young age, and then things didn't work out. So as soon as I was born, he left, and I don't know the whole story, but he left, and I was born. I was brought up with a single mum in a community type upbringing in the village of Tubus area, which is about 30 minutes along the eastern coastline of Port Moresby. Typical village life. I did a lot of subsistence farming with my grandparents. They were my earliest memories, I guess. That's how they fed their families. They had 10 kids of their own, and who were my uncles and aunties. Most of them lived in the house. They had their kids, who were my cousins, and we all grew up in the same house. If not, they were a couple of houses down, and that community type of upbringing in the village. I went to primary school in the village, which is very standard. I don't know if you guys have seen on TV what Papua New Guinea is like, some of the local communities, but some kids going to school without shoes. Some have shoes, and in terms of sport, you're playing with a empty cordial or Coke bottle to emulate playing rugby league or soccer, whatever it is. So that's the type of upbringing it was in the village, and very, very simple.
It strikes me, just from that brief description of your upbringing, it's a world away from the trappings that go with top level professional sports as we would know it today. So how does a boy coming up in that background with family around him go from that setting to becoming a star in the NRL?
I guess there's probably some luck involved and coincidence as well. So when I turned 12, because my dad was Australian, on paper, it was easier for me to go to Australia. And so my auntie at the time, her eldest son got into university in Australia, and she decided to move with him to support him in Australia from Papua New Guinea. And in doing that, they lived here for a few years. And then when I turned 12, she adopted me into her family and decided to give me an opportunity at education, especially in high school. And I guess there was some luck involved with that to be able to get me out of a situation in the village in Papua New Guinea to be then able to go and pursue a high school education. And through that, where the town was based was near the Gold Coast Titans, about an hour and a half south. So they were doing their recruiting around that northern New South Wales area. They were signing kids through their academy system, 20 to 50 kids every year. And I guess I was one of those lucky ones when I turned 17 to be able to, I guess, given an opportunity to pursue pursue a career at the highest level of professional sport.
It's one thing to be given an opportunity, though. It's another thing entirely to be able to grasp it and take advantage of that opportunity. From your point of view, was rugby league all you wanted to play? Did you have your heart set on it? Or was it one of those things that you just fell into, realised you were good at, and things progressed from there?
It was something I always wanted to do as a kid. So when you grow up in a village in Papua New Guinea, most kids at your age are talking about rugby league, what's happened on the weekend, NRL, and who their favorite players are. Do they see that try? So that was a typical upbringing in the 90s. And it's more so now in Papua New Guinea because of social media. So on a Monday morning, we'd get to school, we'd talk about, do you see that try? Steve Renouf at the time was the player that I wanted to be like, or Nathan Blacklock. They were my heroes because they scored long range tries. And I'd try and do that when we were playing games. And so from a young age, I always wanted to be on TV, to run out in stadiums and to carry a rugby league ball. When I moved to Australia, it was a slightly different story because my two cousins at the time, they were playing rugby union. And so I decided it's probably a bit easier logistically for my auntie to just put us into rugby union. And so I took that sport for 5 years from the age of 12 to 17. And then I transitioned into rugby league. And then I guess the timing in that was right too, because that's when the Gold Coast Titans were coming into the competition and they were doing a lot of their recruiting. So, I did my, I guess, apprenticeship through the rugby union club in Lismore. And then when I changed over to league, the opportunity was presented. Was I good at the time? I don't think so. I probably had some physical abilities that gave me an advantage in terms of, I guess, speed. And there wasn't much of me. I was always a smaller guy playing rugby union. So those things probably helped me. And playing in a trial game on a weekend, it was actually a Friday afternoon when I trialed for the Catholic schools combine, and I didn't make it. So I went home and I was pretty sad and upset about that. And those same guys were going to then trial for the regional club side on the Sunday. And I kind of had my head, I had my mindset that those same guys would make that team. So why bother? A couple of my mates who did make the side, they said, no, come along and try it, see how you go. And lucky I did, because that's where I played half decent, scored a few tries, and then Coach John Cartwright was there to give me an opportunity. So I guess those things had kind of fell in place, and I put a lot of it to luck and coincidence, because if those things weren't there, then it wouldn't happen. But then you're right in saying that you kind of have to put the work in to get there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did. You were an exciting back in your career with a nose for the try line in your NRL time. 171 appearances, 75 tries. And then in 2.5, 3 years playing for the Catalan Dragons, you averaged a try every other game with 29 tries in 58 appearances. And all of a sudden, David Mead goes from being the young and up-and-coming rugby league player that has his stars and icons that he wants to follow, to being that man back home in Papua New Guinea, I imagine, who the kids are now wanting to emulate.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's you don't really think about the impact you're going to have on the kids until probably later on in your career, when you appreciate the feedback from the fans. And sometimes I'd be at Broncos training, and one of the young guys coming through preseason, he showed me a photo and said, "That's a photo you took with me at some country town in Australia."
What was that like for you in that instance?
Oh, I had goosebumps, and I couldn't believe it. Going, he's a young player. Isaiah Tass, his name. He's a centre for South Sydney. He showed me, he would have been 14, 15, and I would have been, I don't know, mid-20s. And then when he showed me, I was back into my career. And I looked at it going, man, I cannot believe that this happened. And there's a few other guys who told me that story as well. And, I guess it's pretty cool that you see that because at one point in time, I was that young kid aspiring to be an NRL player. So when you see that, it's quite a nice, humbling feeling. It also makes you think that there is a bit of responsibility on your shoulders to be a good role model, not just at training, but off the field as well, because you just don't know how they're going to look at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And how seriously did you take that responsibility of being a role model, the awareness that you were in the public limelight?
I guess pretty seriously because there's your actions are going to have consequences, whether they're positive or negative, and you'd like to think that they're going to be more positive than negative. So you don't think too much into it, but it's just done through applying yourself at training and then being the best you can off the field. Hopefully staying out of trouble. And so it is a big responsibility, and no one's going to be perfect. No one's going to get it right every time. But when you know that there's young kids looking to you to, whether it's for guidance or as an example, then you try to make your actions through a more positive way.
And you had that platform because we mentioned your time with the Brisbane Broncos and the Gold Coast Titans as part of the Catalan Dragons in the Northern Hemisphere. You were part of that team that made history in playing at Barcelona's home stadium, the Nou Camp, in a victory over the Wigan Warriors in front of a then record Super League crowd of in excess of 30,000 fans. You also helped the Dragons win their first major trophy at Wembley in the Challenge Cup as well. So when you reflect on your playing time, I'm sure there must be many highlights, but what stands out to you?
I think there is a couple there, and you've mentioned a few of them right there. I think my debut is the first one. It's a moment of realization. You kind of look back and go, wow, I dreamt of this moment as a kid, and it's happened. And then, playing for your country, playing for the Kumals, that was another key moment in my career where I just had goosebumps and I couldn't believe it. It took a while to soak in, but the one you mentioned was the Challenge Cup victory in 2018 with Catalan Dragons, because it was the very first trophy that the club lifted since its inception in mid 2000s. And I guess the journey we were on that year was, we weren't doing too well as a team. We were coming to the bottom of the ladder for most of the year, and then back end of the season we started to turn things around. So I guess we developed a bit of resilience throughout the year to hang in there and give ourselves a goal, to something to strive for. So every Challenge Cup game, we kind of just lifted and tried to go for that trophy. And it certainly wasn't an easy route. It was very difficult, but the way we performed in those games was something I'll remember for the rest of my life, because none of those games were easy. They were all very challenging, and we turned up and made it special. I guess what made it even more special was when we got back to Perpignan in France there at 1 a.m., whenever it was. The airport was just filled with people and a lot of cheering in French, which I didn't really understand too much, but it all sounded very exciting. So I got amongst that as well.
When you experience moments like that and you're part of a team and this camaraderie, and your life every day revolves around sport and looking after your body and adhering to a training schedule, I wonder how much of your identity at that point is tied to being a professional athlete.
I guess during your career, it would be majority of it. You ask what you do. I'm a rugby league player. Who do you play for? Catalan Dragons, Brisbane Broncos, Gold Coast Titans. I guess because that's your career, that's what you focus on. And when you wake up in the morning on a Monday, you're thinking about getting your body right because you've got a hard training session ahead of you. And when you do that for 14, 15 years, that's kind of all you know at that point in time. You might dabble into a bit of, social media content creation or podcasting or other businesses here and there, but it's majority of your life is focused on rugby league, because you have to be committed to be able to play at that level. If you're only committed 90, 95%, you just won't make it. It's too hard. There's too many young guys coming through to take your spot. So at that point in time, your whole identity is attached to it, which I think is another reason why many guys struggle when they move away from it, because trying to change that takes a bit of time as well.
Well, I was going to say on exactly that note, if you've lived, breathed, eaten every day of your life being a pro sports athlete, when that time comes, as it does for every man or woman, that you have to hang up your boots or retire from whatever sport it is that has been your existence for a decade or more, it makes the transition all the more dramatic, I imagine, doesn't it? Because it really is suddenly then a venture into the unknown. You've had, in your case, 14 years of your daily routine largely being set out before you, and then it's a fairly steep drop off.
It is a very steep drop off. So when you go from being around, 30 to 40 guys in a squad who are striving for success, who want to do everything they can to be able to get the best out of themselves each and every day, to nothing at all, it's a completely different environment. So I actually had to see a therapist, 6 weeks out of retiring because I struggled through that period. Now it wasn't anything crazy. It was just my wife noticed that my body language had changed. I was putting on weight, eating the same as I was training, but not exercising, not training. So, I was slumping around the house a lot more. So I was actually sitting there, in our office, old office, there was a mirror on the side, and I'd sometimes have no shirt on, typing on the computer, and then I kind of look sideways, and my wife's sitting there going, "Dave, look into the mirror right there." And I look sideways, and she's like, "You look pregnant, mate." Her stomach had come out, and she's kind of like, "Mate, you got to do something." And I said, "You know what? I think I need more sun." So that same day, I went and took a chair, put it out in the sun, sat down in the sun, thinking that's what was going to make me happy. And then I was sitting there on my phone, and then I just see this text come through saying, your free 7-day trial starts today for a gym. And my wife had signed me up to a gym saying, get to the gym now. And so, I started to feel good by then. But seeing a therapist during that period as well, he just said, "Mate, I'll put it simply for you. You've gone from an environment of, alpha males wanting the best, top 1% in their field, to not having it at all and being at home with your wife and kids. No offense to your wife and kids, but you got to do something that is close to that." So I wouldn't say that was an easy fix. That was an easy fix for me. I'm not saying that's what's going to suit everyone, but as soon as I started to put myself in those types of environments, life started to become a bit easier. You'll never be able to emulate what you had throughout your career, but if you can get something as close to that as you possibly can, then things are much brighter.
As we know with professional sports, not everybody's able to retire on their own terms. Some people suffer catastrophic injuries that forces the end of a professional career. For example, in your case, it was your decision. Was it something that you thought about in the months leading up to it and gradually came to that conclusion? Or was it one of those things you hear it from certain athletes that say, I just woke up one morning, decided that was it?
I think it was a slow build up. And preseason in November, we went back to the Broncos. In November, it's hot. Preseason, they're always hot and tough, and you're always up for it. You're ready to embrace it, to get whatever's thrown at you. And it was just one of the training sessions that I kind of just looked and go, man, I'm not keen to push myself anymore. So we're doing these MAS runs. They're about 70 to 80 meter runs with a short turnaround, and your legs are getting tired. Normally you push yourself. So I think I missed 1 or 2 times, and then I kind of just looked across and went, well, I couldn't be stuffed anymore. And I think at that moment you start to plant the seed in your mind. And now I feel like I'm not someone who gave up very easily when things got tough. But when I wasn't willing to do those little things right at training in terms of your rehab, those boring little exercises that help you get on the field, when I wasn't doing all that, I just knew that's when it was time for me to give it up, because it's not only unfair on me, more importantly, it's unfair on my teammates, because, if I'm not willing to push that extra mile for them, then I shouldn't be there. So in the preseason, that's when it kind of started. I got injured first couple of rounds throughout the year, and I saw that there was a PNG game coming up halfway through the year. And I thought, I'm going to give it everything I can, get my leg right, get back on the field, and if I can play that game, give it everything, and then finish on my terms in that game, then I'll be pretty happy. So I guess that's kind of how it unfolded throughout the few months.
And at what point did you start thinking about what you do after you finish playing rugby league? Because I imagine it's not the foremost of your thoughts whilst you're in that environment. It's one thing to decide to retire. It's another thing to acknowledge that, well, hang on, I need to have something to go to outside of sport, because let's be honest, for the majority of people, the the majority of their working career still lies ahead of them.
That's right. It's for me personally, I had no idea what I was going to do. I kind of I knew what I wanted to do, and I'm still working it out right now, and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. But at that point, I had no idea what I was going to do. Now I had some confidence because the RLPA, they've done a great job at looking after the players since they've come in. And so I knew there was a bit of a retirement fund there for me to lean on for over a few months to be able to transition. And, I just knew that if I could give myself 6 to 12 months to prepare for whatever it was that I was going to do, I'd have a bit of time. And you know what, even if I didn't work it out by then, I backed myself to get a job somewhere and still provide for my family. So at this point in time, I'm still working it out what it is exactly that I want to do. I enjoy doing a bit of content creation here and there for my socials, a bit of podcasting. Still do a bit of work with the Brisbane Broncos, the NRL in PNG, and a foundation in PNG. So I'm not somewhere from 9 to 5 every day, which is something that I enjoy. And I'm still, got a couple of different hats on. So,
Enough to keep you on your toes.
Enough to keep me on my toes. That's right. And I feel like whatever it is that I need to do to provide for my family, I'll always do it. So I think it's probably one of those things as an athlete. If you're transitioning, don't be too scared, because if you back yourself like you did playing at the highest level, you'll find a way to make things work.
And there's a couple of things that immediately come to my attention from what you've just said there. One is the support from your family and wife in particular, and the other is the support from the professional sport in itself in providing that fund, that assistance over the first few months immediately after you step away from the game. They strike me as two crutches which you found really helpful.
Extremely. And I think I probably take that for granted a bit sometimes, because a lot of athletes don't have that support outside of, the big codes here in Australia. And so sometimes it's easy for me to say, just do these things and you'll be fine, because I had that backing from the RLPA and the NRL. So, it is a good reminder that there are support systems out there outside of your sporting code if there isn't, like your family or your network of friends. For me, it was number one was my wife, and she always knew that I could do something with myself outside of the sport, because she sees things that I don't see on a day to day. And quite frankly, a lot of the opportunities that have come our way to this day have been because of her pushing me and saying, pick up that phone and make that call. And things have worked out because of that. So I think it's important to have that support with your spouse or partner, or trusted family members or friends, because if they can push you like your coach has pushed you in your sport, I honestly believe that good things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms there, you mentioned that you still have a hand in the Brisbane Broncos and working alongside them. In terms of your experience, what you're able to give back to the sport, and in particular, players who either at that point of retiring or have been forced to leave the game, what are you able to offer them, and what's your advice to them? Because it's a hugely uncertain time, isn't it, the moment you have to or you decide to step away?
I think probably accepting the fact that, it's going to take 3 to 5 years, in my opinion, for you to find something solid again. Some guys are lucky; they go into a media role, and they find that they stay in the game that way, or they go into a coaching position. But in saying that, not all of them are happy doing those things. They just happen to be lucky enough to be paid by and to be able to provide for their families. So I think it's going to take time for you to find something that you really enjoy. If you can accept the fact that it's going to be tough for a while, don't lean on drugs or alcohol or any other form of addictive behavior to help you feel good. If you can accept the fact that it's kind of going to be like a long preseason, then I think you can come out on the other end in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally, to come full circle, if you like. We started by discussing your upbringing in Papua New Guinea with 10 siblings around you and family members up and down the street. When you go back to Papua New Guinea and you see little boys, little girls that are looking to play sport, be it football, rugby, whatever, what does David Mead, now the professional rugby league player that everybody's seen on their screens, have to offer them in terms of advice and help them on a pathway of their own?
Yeah, you see, I think because the NRL team's coming in now, and they're doing a great job in terms of participation, getting the kids registered for sport, helping with social programs. I think for me personally, it's about the day-to-day stuff, making sure that people live a happy, active life. Not everyone's going to go on and play in the NRL, and the number is less than 1% who get to go on and play, and even less get to sustain a long career. And so it's about what do we do with the other 99% of people? What kind of advice or offerings can I personally have, and can those who have come before us have? I think it's about making sure that you live a healthy lifestyle, you enjoy yourself, you have fun, you get your family and friends and the community involved to create that environment. I think sometimes we try to get really serious and talk about hard work, discipline, but that's only going to be for a very few people. I think for the rest who don't make it, enjoy yourself on a day-to-day. Don't be too serious, don't go too crazy, and enjoy each other's company. I feel like I'm someone who's lived a pretty simple life. For me personally, I just enjoy taking my kids to the park and seeing them kick the footy around or kicking a soccer ball around and having fun. And I think it's important that we push that because, for me, that's what makes me happy. And I believe that's what makes a lot of dads happy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, it's been a fantastic conversation and great insight as well into what's possible if you follow your dreams and make the most of the opportunities that present themselves. For our listeners, David, who've enjoyed this conversation, you said that you dabble in social media and content creation. Where can they find you on social media channels?
Oh, mate, I'm on a few different ones. So Instagram, TikTok, David Mead 411. 411's my birthday, so for anyone wondering. And Facebook, I try and have a go on all of them. So hit me up there, and we'll connect there.
Absolutely. I'll be among those that do so for sure. David, thanks a lot for your time. It's been a really enjoyable conversation, and I'm sure the best is still to come. I look forward with interest to see what lies ahead for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate the chat. Thank you.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Huge thanks to David Mead for joining us on this week's edition of the podcast and sharing with us his experience of transitioning from professional sports athlete into a life outside of sport. If you found what he had to say interesting and want to discover a little bit more, then you can do so by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this particular episode, please do feel free to share it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. As I always say at this juncture, the more downloads we get, the easier it becomes for us to attract top-name athletes or leading professionals at the cutting edge of their field. Well, that is just about all for this week's edition of the Science for Sport podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks once again for listening, and I look forward to the next time you can join me on the Science for Sport podcast.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.